It was late on a Tuesday night, just past midnight, when I finally climbed into bed after a grueling day at the office. Emily was sound asleep next to me, her expression serene and content. Everything appeared perfectly normal until my phone suddenly vibrated. Annoyed, I was about to ignore it, but the screen showed an unknown sender. Curiously, I tapped it open, half expecting some useless marketing spiel. Instead, a chilling message confronted me: "Your wife has been unfaithful. She's infected, and so are they." Instantly, I was sitting upright, a cold dread knotting my stomach. The color drained from my face as I struggled to process the words. Was this a cruel prank? Glancing over at Emily's peaceful form, the accusation seemed absurd, almost laughable. Yet, a gnawing fear lingered, anchoring me to the spot. Unsure of what to do next, who might have sent this, or what it truly meant, my gaze returned to the phone when I noticed an attached file, a list of names. With trembling hands, I opened it. Names like Jason, Mark, Liam, Sean, and 11 others scrolled before my eyes, none familiar, yet all suggesting a sinister connection. The word infected haunted me as I scrolled back to it, wishing this were just a terrible joke, but feeling the weight of its reality. Questions and doubts flooded my mind. Had I missed signs? Emily had been a bit aloof, but nothing had hinted at this revelation. It felt as if I were suddenly seeing her in a new, stark light. Compelled by a mix of fear and betrayal, I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up her phone and unlocked it. As I sifted through her messages, I discovered hidden, partly erased conversations. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Last night was incredible. Hope he doesn't find out." Each message struck like a blow, confirming my worst fears. The silence of the room amplified every revelation. Emily lay there, undisturbed, her face a mask of innocence. Part of me wanted to wake her, to confront her with the storm raging inside me. But a more calculating part prevailed. I needed to know everything first. So, I continued my investigation, combing through every app, every hidden folder. Despite her efforts to cover her tracks, fragments of her deceit surfaced in old notifications and forgotten drafts. As I pieced together the grim puzzle, her phone buzzed with a new message from yet another unfamiliar number. My heart clenched as I read the brazen words: "Tonight was amazing. I can still smell you." This wasn't just a casual fling. This was someone who felt entitled enough to text her as she slept by my side. Numbness set in, a defense against the onslaught of pain. I read the message repeatedly, hoping to dull the sharpness of the betrayal. Then, driven by a mix of rage and disbelief, I saved the number and switched to my phone. "Who is this?" I typed with shaking hands. The immediate response was chilling: "You know exactly who I am." The impulse to destroy the phone battled with my need for answers. I countered with, "Just making sure you know she's married." His reply was swift and arrogant: "Yeah, she mentioned you." The audacity of his words was like a slap. He knew about me, yet continued his affair with her, flaunting it like a trophy. I delved deeper into his previous messages on her phone, uncovering a network of deceit. They were many, all unknown to each other but intimately known to her. There was no remorse, no sign of stopping. I sat in the dark, each text and image searing into my memory. By morning, I was running on sheer adrenaline, my mind reeling from the secrets I'd unearthed. Emily was up and about in the kitchen before I woke, moving around as if it were just another day. She poured coffee and scrolled through her phone without a hint of worry. Watching her felt surreal, like observing a stranger with my wife's face. I couldn't contain myself anymore. "Who the hell is Jason?" I demanded, my voice eerily calm yet icy. She stopped dead, surprise flickering over her face as she tried to gauge my awareness. Then, slipping on a dismissive smile, she played dumb. "Jason?" she echoed, feigning ignorance. "I don't know any Jason." There it was, her first icy lie. Anger surged within me, my hands clenching the kitchen counter. I just watched her, silently demanding more. She looked away after a tense moment, fidgeting with her phone as though it were her lifeline. "You're lying, Emily," I said quietly, my voice steely. "I've seen the messages, the names, the list. How about the truth this time?" Her eyes hardened as she faced me, anger flickering in her gaze as if I was the offender. Snooping through my phone? Really? That's low, even for you, she snapped, turning the accusation on me. I was astounded. You think I'm the problem here? I retorted, a bitter laugh escaping me. I'm not the one sneaking around with a bunch of guys. She rolled her eyes, her smirk cutting deep. Oh, please. You think you're so perfect? You're just boring. If you were more interesting, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. It was a gut punch. I'd braced for denial or maybe some regret, but not this, her blaming me for her infidelities. That's your excuse? I wasn't exciting enough, so you thought you'd just pick up a new guy every other weekend? I challenged. Maybe I did, she retorted, her tone defiant. And maybe I liked it. Her words hung in the air, a direct challenge. I stood frozen, a numbness overtaking the anger, a cold realization that the woman I loved, the woman I'd given everything to, had no remorse. She didn't care about the pain she caused. In fact, she seemed to relish it. After she left for work, I sat alone, her words replaying in my head, leaving an echo like a bruise. Maybe I liked it. Her smirk, her dismissive tone, and that look in her eyes were etched into my memory, fueling a darker urge within me. I needed to understand the extent of her betrayal. I booted up my laptop and began a deep dive. I wasn't just looking through her phone now, but through every digital footprint she'd left, old emails, hidden social media, our shared cloud account. I uncovered increasingly damning evidence of her double life, details just beneath the surface. Receipts from unknown dinners, photos with friends I'd never seen, and visits to places she'd lied about. Entire weekends she claimed to have spent with family were actually with other men, like Liam and Marcus, names that matched those on the mysterious list. As I pieced together more of the puzzle, my hand shook with each revelation. Then I stumbled upon a chat with her friend Tara, a complete showcase of deceit. They mocked the men, Amy reveling in the thrill of her double life. She boasted about how she had manipulated me, convinced me of her loyalty by playing the perfect wife. But the most crushing part was her last message to Tara from just 2 days ago. He's so clueless. It's almost sad. He actually thinks he's enough. Reading those words, my vision blurred. He actually thinks he's enough. I gripped the laptop so tightly my knuckles whitened, my breathing sharp and cold. In her eyes I was just a fool, a placeholder, nothing more than an afterthought in her orchestrated life. I built everything around her, yet to her, I was merely a punchline, a man who foolishly believed he was enough. I wasn't just furious, I was deeply humiliated. As I sat there, it was clear that mere confrontation wouldn't suffice. This wasn't about shedding tears or begging Emily for some hollow explanation. She had deliberately chosen a life filled with deceit, secrets, and mockery of me. Now, it was my turn to decide the course of our unraveling relationship. My mind raced through various retaliatory scenarios, pondering what would truly make her feel the weight of her actions. An idea slowly crystallized, one that filled me with a bitter sense of clarity. If Emily relished her secretive escapades, she was about to learn what it felt like to be exposed. I spent that night meticulously planning my response. I couldn't just wait passively for her to return, feigning ignorance of her deceit. I had a more fitting plan. I picked up my phone and dialed the first name from the list, Jason. The call connected after 2 rings, his tone nonchalant. Doubt momentarily gripped me, but the memory of her smirks, her derisive laughter fueled my resolve. "Hey, Jason," I began, my voice unnervingly calm. "Just calling to offer my congratulations." Confusion paused the line. Who is this?" he asked. "Oh, you know who I am," I countered, injecting a forced casualness into my voice. "I'm Emily's husband. You might want to get yourself checked out. Consider this a friendly heads-up." The line fell silent. He didn't attempt to deny anything, the weight of the revelation palpable even through the phone. "Wait, what are you talking about?" he stuttered, but I had already hung up, cutting off any further dialogue. One by one, I called the rest: Corey, Paul, Liam. Each conversation was laced with their shock and my cold resolve, no room for their excuses or apologies. My aim wasn't to listen but to sow discord, to shatter the secrecy Emily had so meticulously crafted. With every call, a grim satisfaction grew within me, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had begun this nightmare. By the time I reached the last name, I felt an unexpected lightness, almost serene. Imagining their collective panic, the frantic calls to Emily, and the collapse of her tangled web was strangely calming. Deciding to deepen her chaos, I sent each man the incriminating screenshots, messages, and photos I had amassed. It was tangible proof that none of them were anything more than entries on her long list of conquests. I wanted them to see her true nature, to feel a fragment of the betrayal that had upended my life. Knowing Emily was out with friends, I visualized her phone inundated with their angry, confused messages, her carefully curated world spiraling. She would return, likely believing she could smooth things over with another lie. But she would come home to more than just an argument. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with visions of her shocked expression as each message dinged, her facade crumbling with every new revelation. But causing her momentary panic wasn't enough. I needed her to confront the entirety of her deception. So, I printed out every piece of evidence I had uncovered, texts, photos, every lie exposed in stark black and white. I laid them out on the kitchen table, a damning display of her duplicity. Each page was a testament to her betrayal, a signal that her days of hiding were over. But I went even further. I took her phone and composed a group message to all the men. Gentlemen, I thought it prudent to introduce you all since you share a common bond, Emily. She has deceived each of you, just as she has deceived me. I attached every incriminating screenshot, showing their conversations alongside others, unveiling the extent of her games. I left the message drafted, a single tap away from sending. I wanted Emily to see the evidence, to realize I held the power to expose her entire facade to her entangled circle. The final piece I laid out was a candid photo from our wedding day, smiling and blissful. I placed it atop the pile on the kitchen table, a stark reminder of the life we had promised each other, now shattered by her deceit. I had just finished as the first light of dawn broke. The quiet hum of the morning seemed to amplify my anticipation as I awaited the sound of her car. Around 7 a.m. I heard her engine, my heart beat with a strange, anticipatory calm. She would walk in expecting normalcy, but her entire world was about to be turned upside down. The moment Emily entered, her face transitioned from tired to confused as she noticed the documents scattered across the table, our wedding photo prominent on top. She froze, eyes flickering between the table and me, mouth agape but silent. I didn't allow her the chance to craft an excuse. Instead, I gestured to the chair across from me. "Have a seat, Emily," I said, my voice controlled and icy. "We need to discuss a few things." Confusion, shock, anger, and even a hint of fear played across her face in rapid succession. She hesitated by the door, clutching her purse, her eyes scanning the damning evidence. When I repeated myself, her mask of indifference slipped back into place, and she slowly took the seat, buying time with every deliberate movement. "So, what is all this?" she asked sharply, as if she could still manipulate the narrative. "What is this?" I echoed, keeping my tone even. "It's everything, Emily. Every message, every lie, all laid out. And there's your phone," I pointed, ready to send a message that will unveil everything to them. For a moment I thought she wavered, her facade cracking as she looked down, perhaps realizing the gravity of her actions. But then she straightened, crossing her arms, her expression morphing into a defiant smirk. "So what? You're playing the victim now? Thinking I owe you something?" Her words stung, but I was resolute. "I don't want your apology, Emily. I want the truth. No more lies, no more deceit. Just admit what you've done." She rolled her eyes, her frustration palpable. "Fine. You want the truth? You've been nothing but dull for years. I needed something more thrilling than just you." Each word was a blow, but I stood my ground, understanding clearly that this wasn't about my failings. It was about her refusal to confront her own dissatisfaction without destroying what we had. "That's your excuse? You're bored, so you justify betraying me with a string of strangers? Do you hear how pathetic that sounds?" Her anger flared as she leaned in, her voice harsh. "I did what I had to do because you never saw me, never listened, always took me for granted. I looked at her, not with sadness but with pity. She was so entrenched in her narrative that she couldn't see the emptiness of her justifications. So this is it then? I said calmly, the anger seeping out of me, replaced by a weary resignation. You're not sorry, not ashamed. Her stare was defiant, unyielding to the end. In that moment, I realized the marriage I had fought for, the woman I had loved, it had all disintegrated. She was beyond reaching, and she had chosen her path clearly. Now, it was time for me to choose mine. I leaned back, observing the stranger before me, reflecting on how I could have ever missed who she truly was. Her expression was now guarded, her remorse non-existent. Just a hardened, bitter woman, clinging to any semblance of control she thought she still possessed. The silence between us was palpable, each of us contemplating our next moves. You don't seem to grasp the situation, Emily, I said, my tone unexpectedly soft. This isn't a battle you can win. You've lied, cheated, and humiliated me, yet you sit there as if you hold the moral high ground. You don't. She scoffed, her laugh short and mocking. You think I care about your opinion of me? I've been living my life, Tom. You were just a backdrop, a steady paycheck, someone to maintain the house. You should be thankful I stayed as long as I did. Her words were meant to sting, but they only brought clarity, highlighting how little she valued our life together. To her, it was all just a means to an end, and I was merely convenient. Grateful? I asked, my tone shifting between amusement and disbelief. Grateful to be deceived, used, and overlooked? Is that your idea of gratitude? She rolled her eyes, her impatience palpable. Can we just skip to the part where you storm out and leave me alone? Her arrogance was astonishing. With pleasure, I responded, the coldness in my voice sharper than intended. But not before I give you something to remember. I picked up her phone, the group message still open, displaying every name and screenshot I'd collected. As she watched my hand, her composure wavered for the first time. Don't you dare, Tom, she hissed, her tone venomous. You'll destroy everything. And what will you do? I countered, finally seeing her true self. Destroy me? You've already done that, Emily. Now you'll witness the collapse firsthand. Her eyes were wild, a mix of desperation and realization of her dwindling power. I held up the phone, my thumb poised over the send button. She lunged for it, panic twisting her features, but I was quicker. I pressed send, unleashing the cascade of her deceit. Instantly, her phone erupted with notifications, names flashing, messages pouring in, her constructed world fracturing with each alert. She reached for the phone, but I kept it just out of her grasp, watching her facade crumble. You think this is the end for me? I asked, my tone steely. This is just the beginning. Every lie, every betrayal, you're going to feel it all. Her face twisted in anger and fear, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She understood then that she was no longer in control, that she was at the mercy of the chaos she'd created. As she absorbed the fallout, I stood up, calm and resolute, and walked away, leaving her amidst the ruins of her own making. The faint buzz of her phone's notifications grew dimmer as I moved down the hall. My hands were steady, my mind clearer than it had been in days. I imagined Emily still at the kitchen table, overwhelmed by each accusatory message as they flooded in. In the hallway, I paused, taking a deep breath, the quiet marking the end of the turmoil that had consumed me. A peace I hadn't felt in months washed over me. She could no longer operate in the shadows. I had exposed every part of her deception. It wasn't long before I heard her hurried footsteps approaching, her breathing ragged with a blend of anger and panic. As she closed in, her face pale and eyes ablaze, she looked vulnerable, like a predator ensnared in its own trap. You think you're clever, don't you? She spat, her voice a venomous whisper. You had no right to disrupt my life like this. I chuckled hollowly, crossing my arms as I met her gaze. Disrupt your life? Emily, you did that on your own. I just made sure you had a front-row seat to the spectacle you orchestrated. Her fist clenched, and for a moment I thought she might strike. Instead, she stepped back, her face crumbling as she fought to compose herself. You don't understand anything, she hissed, her voice cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had everything under control until you meddled. Control? I echoed, incredulous. You were manipulating me, Emily. Did you really think you could keep me in the dark forever, that I'd never catch on to what was happening right beneath my nose? She averted her gaze, unable to face the truth. Emily's expression shifted from anger to desperation. Fine. I made mistakes, Tom. But we can fix this. Just delete the messages. I'll talk to them, say it was all a misunderstanding. It's over, Emily, I cut in, my voice cold and resolute. You can't twist this into something it's not. This isn't a narrative you can rewrite. That's when the realization seemed to hit her, as her face showed a flicker of genuine regret, for her actions or simply for being caught, I couldn't be sure. She looked at me, her eyes glistening, almost pleading in a way that might have once moved me. But now, it only felt hollow, like the countless empty promises we'd exchanged over the years. What do you want then? She asked quietly. Are you really going to discard everything over this? You discarded it, I replied, the truth of my words resonating deeply. You chose to risk everything, and you lost. There's nothing left to salvage. She seemed poised to fight back with a last-ditch insult or excuse, but she remained silent, perhaps finally recognizing the futility of her situation. In the ensuing quiet, I felt a profound sense of closure, the finality of it lifting a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged carrying. The love, trust, and life we shared had disintegrated, along with her hold over me. Without a backward glance, I headed for the door, ready to leave the ruins of our past behind. Behind me, I could hear her stifled, shaky breath, but I didn't turn around. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, the tranquility was striking compared to the turmoil inside. I closed the door, leaving behind her probable attempts to salvage some semblance of control, a problem now hers alone to deal with. For the first time, the weight of her deceptions was no longer mine to bear. I was no longer the husband bending over backwards to keep her content while she schemed behind my back. That part of my life was conclusively over. The liberation I felt was like shedding a skin I hadn't realized I was encumbered with. I got into my car, pausing for a moment to appreciate the empty road ahead before dialing a number I hadn't used in years, my brother Alex's. The distance between us had grown under Amy's isolating influence, her knack for steering me away from those who saw through her. The phone rang twice before Alex answered, his voice sleepy but concerned. Tom, it's early. Everything okay? I hesitated, unsure of how much to share just yet. Hey, Alex, I said, finding comfort in the familiarity of his voice. I was thinking of coming by. Is that all right? He didn't press for details. Of course, Tom. Anytime, he replied, his tone understanding. I knew he had seen through Amy long before I had and had tried to warn me, but I had been too stubborn, too committed to my marriage to see the truth. Now, as I pulled out of the driveway, each mile seemed to lighten the load I carried. Memories of Amy's angry justifications began to fade, replaced by a newfound resolve. I didn't need her validation or approval. I was reclaiming my life. A faint smile crossed my face as I drove toward a future free from her deceptions, a future that was wholly mine. Staying with Alex felt like reconnecting with a life I had forgotten, one unmarred by Amy's manipulation. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely grounded. On the third morning, I rose early, drawn to the stillness. I brewed a cup of coffee and sat at my brother's kitchen table, letting the reality of my newfound freedom fully settle in. For the first time since it all began, I allowed myself to truly breathe, absorbing the full weight of my liberation. Alex joined me, quietly placing a mug across from mine, the silent understanding between us speaking volumes. As we enjoyed the peaceful morning, he finally asked what I planned to do next. It struck me then, I had choices I hadn't felt in a long time. What am I going to do next? I echoed, pondering. I don't know, Alex, but I do know what I'm not going to do. I'm done letting someone else define who I am. He nodded, his smile growing. About time, Tom. You deserve better than what she put you through. He was right. I had diminished myself to fit into a life that lacked authenticity, holding on to a phantom that had never truly existed. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with old friends, family, and colleagues, people who genuinely cared and welcomed me back with open arms. Their warmth and understanding was a balm, and they offered support without pressing for details, respecting my need to share or just enjoy the silence. One afternoon, I began to pack up my belongings from the house I had shared with Emily. It felt surreal, like I was collecting fragments of a life that no longer fit me. Memories arose, but they seemed distant, almost as if they belonged to someone else. I took only what truly mattered: my clothes, a few personal keepsakes, and books that I cherished. Everything else, I left behind for her to sift through, the remnants of a life she had unraveled. When I closed the door for the last time, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. I walked away without a backward glance, feeling the weight of the past finally lift. Starting anew was both daunting and thrilling. Each day brought me closer to rediscovering who I was, what I truly wanted, and what I deserved. I hadn't expected to find peace so quickly, but stepping away from that toxic past uncovered a quiet strength within me, a resilience that had endured even through the toughest times. Moving forward, I was determined to live a life marked by honesty and respect, a life I wouldn't compromise for anyone. The ordeal had tested me, but I emerged with a newfound freedom. Now, for the first time in years, I felt genuinely free, ready to embrace whatever came next on my own terms.